Hello, welcome to Module 1, Lesson 1 of our CASP Plus course. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the following, like security services, traffic monitoring, sensors, segmentation, and software-defined networking, or SDN. So first, let me give you an introduction about what a secure network architecture is. So to provide a secure network design for a new or existing network, security experts need to examine security requirements and objectives. They also need to provide proper authentication and authorization controls. Practical and security issues arise while designing a contemporary company network. Information systems can now be accessed from devices outside of the company's network, which is known as deperimeterization. Devices range from a simple smartphone to an IoT gadget or Internet of Things that sends telemetry data to a vital monitoring dashboard. So, if you took the CompTIA Security Plus and Network Plus courses, you should at least be familiar with the security services. I will quickly explain each of these services, then give you a casework so you can further explore these services. You can use this list as a checklist as you compare different security components and services. So the first one is load balancer, right? So I'm sure you have heard what a load balancer is before. So load balancers are quite essential for high availability or HA e-commerce sites and businesses that run server farms. So when hosting a server farm supporting remote desktop application, it's important to monitor each member's load to guarantee new requests are sent to the least loaded servers. As you see here, right? If this is least loaded, right, and this is heavily loaded, already 100%, so the next few requests coming from the client will be forwarded to the least loaded server. So this is how the load balancer works. Next is the IDS and IPS, which is in here and in here, right? So IDS and IPS keeps an eye on your network all the time, looking for possible problems and logging information about them. They can also stop problems from happening and let security administrators know about them. Some networks also use IDS IPS to find problems with security policies and stop people from breaking security policies. IDS and IPSs are very important as they can stop attackers from gathering information about your network while trying to break in. Let's talk about firewalls, UTM, or Unified Threat Management, and next generation firewalls. So regarding firewalls, right? So security measures such as firewalls are designed to prevent undesired traffic from entering and exiting your network. Routing protocols and ports are all controlled by firewall rules. Now, advanced firewalls will have more granular rules. However, it will slow down traffic processing as a result. Now, what's a next-gen firewall? So, because they're designed to perform several security functions, next-generation firewalls have evolved from second-generation firewalls. Additionally, next-gen firewalls often have additional features like, VPN, right? VPN support and antivirus protection. Next-gen firewalls include DPI functionality, which means they can provide DLP or data loss prevention and IPS protection, in addition to their standard security features. Next-gen firewalls may seem similar to UTMs, right, or the Unified Threat Management here. However, next-gen firewalls are built for speed. We put here speed and efficiency. Okay. So this is for the next-gen firewalls. Now there's another word here, or another term here, which is UTM, right, or Unified Threat Management. So UTM appliances combine firewall and other security features into a single unit that may be deployed on premises or in the cloud. All of the features or security features you need are included in this single package, like as you see here. There's a lot. You have spam filter, DLP, it can be a router, it can be a proxy, a firewall, WAF, antivirus, and IPS. So UTM is a very solid solution for small businesses with limited resources, but it does not provide the DID level or the defense in depth necessary for larger clients. Okay, so this one is for smaller businesses. The fourth one is what we call as WAP, right? WAF, or the Web Application Firewall. So a WAF, or Web Application Firewall, works at the level of the web application. It lets HTTP or HTTPS traffic, right, coming here, going here, to be looked at for any strange behavior in the rest of the network traffic. A WAF can be set up as an appliance, a filter, or a plugin that imposes a set of rules to an HTTP connection without slowing it down, right? So for example, here you have a WAF within your DMZ and you have a couple of web servers. A lot of web users, right, is going to try to connect to this web server via HTTP or HTTPS, but it has to be filtered first by the web application firewall, right, before it reaches the web servers. Next is the NAC, or the Network Access Control, right? So NAC, or the Network Access Control, makes sure that devices that connect to our enterprise networks have a strong, secure state or posture. A captive portal is usually used to connect devices to a VLAN for registration. If a device complies with the policy, it could be given access to the network. Devices that didn't follow the rules would be sent to an isolation VLAN where they could use remediation services. So for example, if you have this device here, but this does not comply with the set poster compliance filter, right, or setup, then it will not be allowed to access the corporate network. It will be quarantined or put to an isolated VLAN. So the IT administrator or the user will be able to run like patch updates, right? Download software updates from Windows. So once it's compliant, then it will be allowed access to the network. So that's the purpose of NAC. One of the in Cisco, right, that they have Cisco ISE, or Identity Services Engine, which is being used as a NAC as well, right? Next is the VPN, or the Virtual Private Network. So when you need to connect across networks that you don't trust, VPN gives you a safe and encrypted tunnel. So here, threat actors from the outside can't use the tunnel to get to your business data. A VPN can be used to protect remote workers and connect sites across networks that can't be trusted. So in this illustration, right, a user from, let's say, working from home, right, and he has to connect to the corporate network. He will use a VPN client to be able to establish a VPN tunnel via the internet going to the corporate network using the VPN gateway. So if there's an attacker here, it will be this guy will not be able to see whatever traffic is being sent on the tunnel, right? Because this is encrypted. So that's the purpose of virtual private network. Next is DNSSEC, or Domain Name System Security Extension. So with DNSSEC, you can add the DS record or digital signature to the DNS records of your domain names, making them more secure. By upgrading to Premium DNS, you'll have access to DNSSEC protection. You can also manually add a DS record to your account if you're using self-managed DNSSEC. Next is NAT Gateway, or Network Address Translation Gateway, which is in here, right? So when a private network is connected to the internet, it doesn't require assigning each host a public IPv4 address. So this is actually known as Network Address Translation, or NAT. So hosts can establish internet connection and get responses, but they will not receive connections established by the internet, right? So if you have users here who wants to connect to the internet, it doesn't mean you have to assign a public IP for each of these, right? What if you have 1,000 users here, right? And this public subnets is quite limited and it's quite expensive to buy. So what you can do is to install a NAT gateway. So if these users want to connect to the internet, then their IP addresses will be translated to this public IP assigned to this company, right? So all of them can use it, but using different ports, right? That's what you call as port address translation, which is a flavor of network address translation. All of this is happening on the NAT gateway. So this can either be a router or this can be a firewall. Next concept is the internet gateway. So a node that joins two networks, right? Using different protocols or rules to communicate is known as a gateway, right? Now, if you think of an internet gateway, it is used as a gateway to or from other networks. So thanks to internet gateways, we can communicate and exchange data with each other, right? So let's say you have a server here, server, e-commerce servers, and people from outside. Let's say a user wants to connect to here, right? Of course, the only path is via the internet, right? Because of the internet gateway, this could be a router, this could be a firewall. They will be able to reach out or connect to a specific service on this web servers, which is inside a specific company or hosted at a specific company, right? So that's the internet gateway. So this is also very popular in cloud networking, right? If you have servers within the cloud that needs direct access to the internet for patch updates and etc., they can use an internet gateway directly, right? Now let's talk about forward proxy. Forward proxies are servers, right, that go between a client, this one, on a network and the internet, right? So you have the forward proxy in here. So when these machines want to get information from the internet, the proxy server intercepts those requests, right, and connects to web servers on their behalf. So that's what you call as the forward proxy. Now the next one is the reverse proxy, which is exactly the reverse process of the other one, right, of the forward proxy. So here, what's a reverse proxy? So a server that sits in front of one or more web servers, right? This is your web server, and intercepts requests from clients is called a reverse proxy. So there's your client requesting services on this responding servers. So with the reverse proxy, when a client sends a request to a website's or original server, or origin server, the request is caught by the reverse proxy server at the edge of the network. The reverse proxy server will then send requests to the original server and get answers back from it. Next is DDoS protection, right here. So if a company is targeted by DDoS attacks or distributed denial of service attacks, the consequences can be disastrous with costly outages and dissatisfied customers. Targeted organizations have been subjected to attacks with traffic quantities exceeding 1.5 to 2.5 Tbps. That's terabytes per second, right? That's really huge, right? So if you remember around 5 years ago, or maybe more years ago, an attack on Google resulted in like 180,000 DNS servers receiving faked requests for the domain name system, or DNS. Right, so Google's infrastructure services receive the majority of the traffic. All right. Some familiar word here, router, right? We know this already. Routers are devices that connect networks. They work at layer 3, L3, right, of the OSI model, and they connect networks together. So a switch that supports VLANs may also be able to handle routing, and this is what we call as a layer 3 switch. So this can also be layer 3, right? If you configure SVIs or switch virtual interface, right? And you can enable a routing protocol there, right, on that specific interface, and that can be called as a layer 3 interface. Another component here is the email security. So email security refers to how email accounts and the content and communications shared through them are protected against unauthorized access, data loss, and other types of compromise. It includes tried and tested methods like password protection, email encryption, as well as more advanced features like spam filtering and stopping fraud. So if you have incoming emails, it has to go to a secure email gateway first. Then whatever the policy here, right? Some emails like spam will be dropped, and some allowed emails, right, that complies will be allowed to be sent to the corporate network, right? So that's the function of secure email gateway. For Cisco, they have what we call as ESA, or email security appliance, right? Cisco ESA. So this is their secure email gateway product, and this is from Cisco. The last one is the API gateway or XML gateway. So here, right, for API gateway, request routing, composition, and protocol translation are just some of the functions that an API gateway performs on behalf of clients. Typically, it uses numerous microservices to process a request and then aggregates the information to identify the best course of action. It is able to also translate between web protocols and others that are not. Now, what's an XML gateway? Here. So a web services platform's DMZ tier that is accessible from the outside is known as an XML gateway. DMZ tiers are typically located between corporate units. All right, that's the security services. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is traffic monitoring. So traffic monitoring or traffic mirroring is used to copy network traffic and forward the traffic to an analyzer. And this is mostly helpful if you are troubleshooting a network issue or investigating a potential breach. First, let's talk about span ports, right? I'm sure if you're a network engineer, you might come across what a span port is, right? Especially if you're running a Cisco network in your data center, right? So what is a span port? Port mirroring, right, which is called a span or switchport analyzer, are ports on a network switch that are configured to forward a copy of packets from one port to another where an analyzer is connected. Take note that the span operation does not impact the switch's normal operation. So in this illustration, right, you have a switch, then you configure, so let's say this is a port, right, that is where this device is connected. You have a port where the device B is connected. So whatever traffic, right, depending on what you set, what you configure on the switch, it could be the receiving traffic or the outgoing traffic. All of this can be captured and on this port, forwarded on this port, right? So it will be received by a specific analyzer. So you will have a view on whatever traffic is, being received or forwarded on this specific port from device A or coming from device B, right? So there, this is what a span port is. Next is a network tap. So here, right, it is possible to gain access to and to monitor network traffic through the use of network taps. So network taps are dedicated hardware devices that sit between either a router, a switch, or a firewall. Because they use distinct dedicated channels for sending and receiving data, taps ensures that all data reaches the monitoring or security devices in real time. Okay, so taps, this is typically deployed in line, right? Let's say you have a router in here, you have a firewall, right? You can easily install it in here, in between, right? That's how you use a network tap. And this is actually much more flexible. And I said, right, this is you can get data in real time as compared to span ports. All right. Let's go to the next topic, which is about sensors. Right. So network sensors are critical components of the network to provide insights and trending analytics from the packets captured from the network. There are several mechanisms involved to monitor potential breaches, data leakage, and information sharing within the network. Let's talk about SIEM first, right? So for enterprises, right, SIEM provides a way to consolidate security management events by sending logs from security appliances to an organization's central system. It provides correlation and normalization as well as real-time data inputs for reporting and alarms so that the context can be added and alarms can be set. Okay, so with SIEM, if you have like all of these data sources like a router, switch, firewall, or the PC. All of this can forward specific events or logs going to the SIEM, and the SIEM will forward it to a specific dashboard, right? Or well, at least you will have a view on whatever is happening, and you can do correlation analysis between like the firewall and the user. So this makes the analytics better, right? So you'll be able to pinpoint a specific problem or potential breach in the network. Next is FIM, or file integrity monitoring. So the data that an organization has can be very important, right, to allow to how it does business. Some examples of data that is held and processed are sales orders, processing records in a CRM database, right, and financial transactions in a bank. So file integrity monitoring is one of the many ways to make sure that data is guaranteed. Of course, right, you don't want to be doing a transaction or maybe sending money from your bank to another bank. However, when your file was compromised, it may change the value of the amount that you sent or maybe the account number that you put. So it's not gonna be received by the intended recipient, or maybe the amount that you sent will be changed, and that's going to be bad, right? Next is SNMP. So if you're a network engineer, you should, well, at least that's one time, you've configured SNMP, right, on Cisco, on different network devices. So here, network devices can communicate with each other using SNMP, or Simple Network Management Protocol. Using this technology, various hardware and operating system devices can connect with one another. Without SNMP, there's no way network management tools can track and analyze the health of a system's network, identify and monitor devices in real time, or track changes to the system. Now let's talk about NetFlow. NetFlow was originally designed to log traffic on Cisco networking devices. An insight into bandwidth consumption and traffic flow can be gained by network engineers using it. NetFlow is not developed to replace SNMP, remember that. In NetFlow, network anomalies can be spotted by establishing a baseline. Okay? So here it's just like span, right? If you have a switch here, you enable it with NetFlow. All traffic coming from the user or from the server to or from, right, can be forwarded to a NetFlow collector, so you can establish a baseline, and you'll be able to see if there's any outlier, right? So let's say you have this baseline, right, on using NetFlow. However, on a specific day, right, it suddenly came up very high, so there could be some kind of anomaly, and this should be investigated because it's outside, it's just too far from the baseline, right? So there must be something happening here. All right. Next is data loss prevention, or DLP. So here, preventing the unintentional exfiltration or leakage of sensitive data begins with properly identifying and securing such data. A variety of methods can manage this requirement. It is possible to assure proper data management and operational procedures by applying policy-based measures. Network egress points can benefit from DLP filtering. Right? So one of the examples of DLP is the one that we discussed earlier, which is secure email gateways. All right, and the last sensor is antivirus, right? So we know if you're using a laptop or your own personal computer, you should have an antivirus, right? So you don't. There's a lot of risk now, like people from outside can install can install a ransomware, so they can own or encrypt the data that you have within your hard disk. So if you want to retrieve all of this data, you have to go to a website or to a certain link to pay that, so they can give you the encryption key, and that's going to be expensive, right? So with antivirus, right, cyber criminals can't easily spread harmful software because of this kind of protection in place. This action should be recorded and monitored, even if the antivirus detects nothing wrong, so we know how widespread it is. A centralized reporting dashboards are very ideal for this. Okay, so that's the antivirus. Okay, let's talk about segmentation. So what is segmentation? So segmenting a network into smaller subdomains allows network teams to segment the subdomains and deliver different security policies and services to each subdomains. So here you're creating logical subnetworks from physical networks, right? And this is the goal of network segmentation. Controls are added to each of the network component once it has been broken down into smaller, more manageable units. So what is microsegmentation? So using rules that specify how data and applications are accessible and controlled. Microsegmentation is a method for dividing a network into discrete, logical, and secure pieces. In contrast to network segmentation, which relies on hardware and is geared towards the north-south traffic flow. So when you say north-south, you have like let's say you have a switches here, you have servers, you have a firewall here, firewall. So if traffic goes here, that's what you call as north-south traffic. While microsegmentation, right, is software-based and is geared toward east-west data flow or traffic between server. So this north-south, right? East-west traffic is between servers in here, right? That's east-west traffic. So I think 10 years back, this is a big problem, right? Especially for banks. So let's say you have servers, let's say this one, on this example, you have a web app and database server. And there are instances where third-party providers will need access to a specific server. Let's say to a web server. Before, all of this are just connected via switch, so it means if they're sitting on the same VLAN, then there's a possibility that this guy can access the server, the app server, or here jump to the DB server. Of course, you can implement access lists and etc., right? But these are very these are not strong controls, right, to protect the east-west traffic. With microsegmentation, there's a way for you to ensure that this guy will not be able to easily access or connect to the server that is not intended to be accessed by a specific user, right? There's also some use cases where, let's say you have all of these servers, right, on a VMware environment, and this is compromised. All of the web server using attributes or tags, you can easily microsegment all of these servers, right? So it will not be able to connect to the app or the DB because this is compromised already. So because of those tags, if you have like 10 or 20 web servers, you can easily do it on a VMware environment, right? So as to protect the most important server, which is the database server. Okay? So that's microsegmentation. All right, VLAN, we know this already, right? There are two types of VLAN. Those that use physical location as a mechanism of segmentation and those that do not. Custom networks do not have to be part of the same VLAN, and they can be combined into a single logical network that is viewed as a whole rather than as a collection of subdomains with separate configuration. So here you have users, right? So let's say you have the HR, IT, what else, finance, right? You can put them logically on their own specific VLANs, right? You can, if you don't want these guys to talk to each other, the classical way to do it is to put an ACL, right, on their SVI, right? Because if you don't, then this VLANs can talk to each other by default, right? You can also forward it to a firewall, right? So before reaching it, so let's say you have a firewall here. When this user sends the traffic to the switch, it has to forward it to the firewall first before going down to the other VLANs. Another practical way to do it is by using a NAC, right, or Network Access Control. So this is the one that we discussed earlier. Okay. Next is a jump box, right, or a jump server. So to access and administer devices in another security zone, you need a jump server or what we call as jump host or a jump box. This is, or as a protected and monitored equipment that crosses two different security zones, a jump server provides a regulated method of access between them. So if you're building um, uh, infrastructure in the cloud, right? So they enable a specific server called a bastion host, right? So bastion host is also just like a jump box. So if a third party user or somebody has to access a server, he has to connect to the jump box first before being allowed to connect to the server, right? So you're not going to be allowed to connect directly. So this is what you call as a jump box. All right. Another concept here, a screen subnet. So it refers to an architecture in which logical screening routers operate as firewalls, right? And it's known as a screen subnet. A screen subnet divides a network into three sections, such as the perimeter, right? The perimeter here, or the DMZ, the internal network, and the external network or the internet. The perimeter network should have one exterior router, and the internal network should have one internal router to assist in preventing inbound connections. Let's talk about the data zones. Segmentation of infrastructure services into logical groupings with the same communication security regulations. And security needs is used as zoning to limit the risk of an open network. Okay? So here, you have different zones, right? Management zone, internal zone, DMZ zone, external zone, or going to third party, right? Best practice design, put a firewall there, right? So you have filtering on the layer 3, layer 4. If you are a firewall, right? You can also filter, I don't know, you can put filters here up to the upper layers of the OSI, right? So you have like IPS, IDS detection, because this one is very important, right? The management zone, because this will have access to majority of the services here. So this should be protected at least. Okay. So with this zoning, right, it ensures that any compromise happening on a specific network will not be easily propagated to the other network, right? On a virtual environment, on a data center, this is actually the setup that they do, right? Let's say if you're talking about VMware using NSXT, VMware NSXT, you can easily configure a distributed firewall, right, in front of a web server, so you can easily protect it. It doesn't have to go somewhere else to a centralized firewall to get that specific level of protection. You can put it on the endpoint, in front of the endpoint, and it's much easier. All right. Next is the staging environment, right? So in essence, a staging environment is just like a replica of a live production environment where software engineers are free to test their softwares. So despite their striking resemblances, the staging and production settings are entirely distinct. As soon as a change is made in a production environment, it immediately impacts the end users. On the other hand, all system modifications take place internally in a staging environment. So this provides software developers more leeway to experiment and make changes without affecting the end user experience, which is being provided by the production environment. Right? So that's the staging. And the next one is the guest environment, right? So visitors will be able to connect to the internet via distinct SSIDs, right, for wireless, or networks that are not connected to your private network via the guest network or the guest environment, right? So if you have a wireless LAN guest here, connects to the AP, we will not have access to the corporate network and will just be allowed access going to the internet. Okay? All right, the very last topic is about SDN, or software defined networking, right? So over the past decade, software-defined networking technology has become a well-established approach to network management. So a shift to big centralized data centers and the virtualization of computer systems has been a major factor in their development. The transition to cloud computing has also boosted SDN usage. So what is OpenSDN? It is possible to design and operate a network using SDN because it is built on a set of open standards rather than relying on a variety of vendor-specific devices and protocols. For the first time, a consistent interface for separating the control and data planes of a network has been established. An SDN controller known as ONOS, or Open Network Operating System, was developed. Right? Open Network Operating System. Now, so what's a hybrid of SDN? Networks that use both classical and SDN protocols are known as hybrid SDNs. Using a hybrid SDN, a network engineer can bring new SDN technologies like OpenFlow into the legacy network without having to completely re-architect the architecture. Next is SDN overlay. So overlaying an existing network with a logically independent network or network component is known as an SDN overlay. And it is a deployment strategy for SDN. An example of an SDN overlay is Cisco ACI and VMware NSXT. So as you will see here, right, on the illustration, you can have any devices here, right? Well, for Cisco, it's different because it has to be Cisco Nexus switches, and you're gonna run ACI on top of it, right? And this you cannot use any other devices for Cisco ACI. However, for VMware NSX, if you have data center switches here, whatever data center switch that you want, as long as they have connectivity, supports L3, right? You can put or install VMware NSX on top of it as an SDN overlay. So this is not dependent on the physical switch that you installed. However, Cisco ACI only allows you to use Nexus switches as the physical underlay for the data center. Okay, there you go. So on the next part, it's just a case study, right? So we've discussed a lot of security features and components and etc. But here on the casework, based on what we discussed, I'd like you to research which vendors provide the following security services below. Like, for example, you have a load balancer in here. So one of the well-known load balancers are F5, Kemp Load Balancer, A10 Network, and there's actually a lot more. I think it's good that you at least have a view on what all of these are, but you also have to at least be familiar on what vendors provide these services. Maybe just come up with three, but there's just a lot, right? In Cisco, they can cover the majority of these services, right? But best to check the other vendors. So if you come across like if you have to be solutioning a specific or proposing a specific bill of material to protect your data center, right? So you at least have some idea on what vendors to choose from. Okay. And also this one, Internet Gateway, email security, SIEM, SDN overlay, and etc. Okay, so this is just for your own research. All right, thank you very much. In this lesson, we spoke about security services, traffic monitoring, sensors, segmentation, and software-defined networking. Thank you very much for watching the video.